I'm Lois Perry. I'm the director of CAR26 and welcome to the inaugural CAR26 forum. We launched just prior to COP26 to combat the government's mad green energy policies. We have campaigned for a net zero referendum and we want to encourage debate, and that is what tonight is all about. Let's talk about all this green crap. Britain's domestic energy security has been sold down the river on a quest for the green holy grail, whilst green taxes are lining the pockets of green technocratic billionaires in Silicon Valley. It's all a con, isn't it? This is energy prices skyward as everyday Brits now face a choice of eat or heat. We are a broad church with supporters including those who say CO2 is life and we need more of it and it's not causing any problems, or those that say that CO2 is indeed causing a slight temperature increase, but we should learn to adapt and live with it. And those who believe that CO2 is terrible, but why should we do anything when China is pumping out more of the stuff than our David Attenborough's green porn propaganda? Swaths of repressed climate scientists say the data has been played with, and there's no consensus that humans and their machines are causing the planet to turn into a blazing inferno. Not whatsoever. So, is Armageddon nigh? We think not. But what does my panel think? First of all, joining me to thrash out all the burning issues are Mike Graham, the legendary talk radio host who actually doesn't really need any introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Until very recently, LBC superstar Majid Nawaz, campaigner and activist. Howard Cox undoubtedly is one of the most important transport lobbyists in Britain. Through his work with Fairfield UK, nobody has done more to save billions for road users. The smoked Salmon King and former Brexit Party MEP, Lance Foreman. And last but by no means least, Roger Tattersall, the noted independent climate science and energy policy expert. So tonight we're going to be talking all about the green stuff, and I'm going to go to Mike first because I know that you're a massive, massive fan of green policies and net zero. What do you think? What do you think in terms of taxes? Do you think they're actually going to do anything to save the environment, or is it a complete load of rubbish?
Well, if taxes were to improve the environment and taxes were to change the way that the earth is actually evolving, there would be a reason to put them on. But unfortunately, it seems to me that taxes are only there for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to fill the coffers of the government. They want to try and take as much money off us as possible before it all goes horribly wrong for them and everybody works out that it is a complete con. I mean, most of the reason why the earth is changing is because the earth changes. Most of the reason why the climate changes is because the climate changes. The reason they've only been collecting data for 200 years is because they didn't know how to do it before. And they look around and go, yeah, but we know that we are causing all of this. And you go, well, what exactly is net zero about? Nobody can explain. What exactly will we achieve if net zero is sort of arrived at in the year 2050? And what exactly will be the difference between what we do now and what we do in 20 years' time? It's all kind of, only today there was a story which said that actually insulation, which has been carried out in millions of homes in Britain, has caused more problems than it's solved. 2 million homes, they reckon, are now unsellable because they're damp, they're full of mould, the insulation wasn't done properly, and this was all done at the behest of government and paid for by us. So that's just one small example of where we're going wrong.
And you don't like recycling either, do you, Mike? Not a big fan of recycling.
I don't mind recycling if it actually works, but most of what I put in a recycling bin ends up in landfill. Nobody recycles anything. China used to take a load of cardboard from us. Now they don't because it's not expensive enough for them to reconstitute into something else. I've watched people putting brown bottles in a brown bottle site and white bottles and green bottles, and then I've watched a truck pick them all up and dump them all into one big container. And you're just going, what's going on? Why am I recycling food? I don't recycle food, I eat it. As you can see.
Isn't it, Mike? The whole thing about the recycling and apparently all of the recycling is being actually dumped into the oceans, and that's why we keep seeing pictures, which are probably staged anyway, of like little birds with packs of things around their neck and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, I don't want to get into COVID stuff, this isn't about COVID, but it's a bit like the mask wearing. It's a sign of showing that you're a really good girl or a really good boy, I think.
Well, it's no surprise, is it, that in the South China Sea, most of the bottles that you find there, plastic bottles, are written in Chinese. Because guess what? The Chinese just dump stuff into the sea. As does every cruise ship that goes around the world. They don't care. In Africa, they dump rubbish into the rivers. You know, we are single-handedly sitting here, Boris Johnson and Carrie, maybe not for very much longer if things go well, sitting around going, well, Richmond Park's nice and clean. You can cycle round it and it's great. And you go, what the hell are you talking about? You're an idiot. There's a volcano going off in the Canary Islands, which is poisoning the planet at the rate of 60 times what we are saving by not driving around in a Range Rover.
Nonsense. And what about all this rewilding stuff? It seems to me that Carrie just wants us to be completely and utterly whether that's our own fuel, food. If not, we don't make anything. I mean, what does she want? Because it is her. This is the woman
who grew up on Clapham Common, right? She knows much about rewilding, as I know about transgendering into a woman. You know, this is not a woman who should be in charge of anything. You know, she's very good at putting up wallpaper. Apparently, that's not going to be for much longer. She's very good at representing a place in Kent where they've got gorillas in a cage. You know, but what the hell is she doing running the country? I'm sorry, we did not elect Carrie Johnson to be anything. I'd rather that she just stayed, without wishing to sound in any way sexist, in her lane, did what she did and didn't try to influence the Prime Minister and didn't try to tell me to pay more tax to save the planet.
Oh, absolutely, but it's not sexist, is it? I mean, even if he was with a bloke, we'd still be saying the same. She's unelected. What does everybody else think? Lance, what do you think about it all?
Well, I do tend to agree with Mike that there is just so much madness, and it's all, you know, there are a number of different groups that are driving all this, and they all have their interest in driving it. You know, business, particularly big business, corporate businesses are driving it because they can make money out of this whole green stuff, and that's that's it's obviously good for them. The media drive it because it sells much more. It sells papers if you can talk about countries burning down and extreme temperatures and so on, rather than just regular. The weather's bad today. So the media like it. Multilateral sort of political organizations like the UN and the EU love it because the thing about climate is that it doesn't stop at your national boundary. So if they can say, this needs an important sort of international body like us to deal with it, it gives them strength and power. And then, of course, it gives government power too if they can implement laws to control our lives in exactly the same way as we've learned from COVID. Here, with climate change. So there are a lot of different people, the media, politicians, these sort of huge multilateral organizations and the corporate sort of cronyist business people that all benefit from saying that there's a catastrophe going on. And meanwhile, the little people like us are all getting shafted and we don't get a look in.
Is it? It's actually private business as well, but we'll come to that again in a minute. Margid, what do you think about the control aspect of it, the government's having so much power and control? Because I know that that's definitely something that you focus on when you do your campaigning.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that I'd like to distinguish between our individual obligations, if you like, to make sure we live in a clean environment versus what climate policy is. And completely what we're here today to talk about is climate policy, and clearly, something is amiss. I believe that big tech corporations are the new big oil, which was the new big tobacco. Yeah. And it makes sense for big tech corporations who are lobbying governments to try and encourage through lobbying and PR campaigns a shift to what they're calling green energy. But really, it's technology. How to harness energy from converting natural resources, wind, water, waves, into electricity using their technology that they can then sell on. And case in point is Tesla as the electric car maker who during the lockdowns are talking about government control, and I'm adding to it big corporations working with big government. During the lockdowns, you saw how Elon Musk suddenly became the richest man in the world. Yeah. So I agree with what Lance said, that there is certainly a lot of conflicts of interest involved here. And adding to that, if you then introduce this notion that we've got to meet our net zero targets, What I worry about is how that's going to be achieved in such a short space of time, in particular because the components we need to be able to move away from fossil fuels to what they're calling green energy, a lot of those technological components rely on areas of the region that are at the moment, there's no guarantee that that supply from those areas will continue. Case in point here would be Taiwan. And a problem there, of course, is that, whether it's Afghanistan, which obviously everyone knows what happened there, and the uranium that is needed for batteries that power electronic vehicles that sit under the soil in Afghanistan.
Now, hasn't it? Biden's handed over the control, is that right, completely to China to get those minerals.
And there were press reports that the Chinese military is now landing in Bagram Air Base, which was the US Air Base. So we've got a problem.
A deal's been done.
Now,
absolutely.
We need those resources, the uranium in Afghanistan, the semiconductors made in Taiwan. Now, China is close to both of those. And, people are expecting an annexation of Taiwan by China. Of course, Afghanistan, as you just said, has been lost. So how do we get to a situation where we are not reliant on adversarial powers that do not mean us well for our energy? Now, the only way you do that, back to your original question, the only way you do that is by forcing our compliance to a Chinese model. And so I do think this is linked to government power because the people that are going to oppose this, because there will be a spike in prices, we're already seeing this, that will lead, there's a huge natural gas crisis, not least because of the Russian situation with the Ukraine vis-a-vis Biden's demands on Russia and NATO membership there.
Aren't they? And they're basically taking a punt on the fact that they think that we're not going to be penalising them for what they're doing potentially in the Ukraine, because they can just literally cut off our energy supply and the energy supply to the whole of Europe, which is true, because we haven't got energy efficiency, because we're not making our own gas, we're not doing any of the things that we're supposed to be doing to the proper extent. But can I just go over to Roger, because Roger just wanted to talk about more from the science side. Roger, can you just tell us just a little bit about yourself? And we had a chat, didn't we? And you said to me, you're very concerned about the whole energy policy being based on this basically dodgy science, and that the climate modelling is as nonsensical as COVID modelling. And I mean, the thing is, though, on that basis, why do we keep being told this 97% figure about there being a consensus on global warming and climate change from scientists? What's that all about?
Well, the problem there is that they need to put forward this idea that there's a big consensus, because they don't have particularly good scientific evidence to hold up to support their argument. So they're more reliant on saying, well, everybody agrees with this, which of course isn't true. And all of the studies that have come up saying, 97% of scientists agree about carbon dioxide causing a crisis of global warming, they've all been debunked. And they're just based on very bad statistics. It's the old case of if you torture the data enough, it'll confess, even to crimes that it didn't commit. So what this is really all about is that politics doesn't like stories that change or having to do a U-turn because the evidence has changed. And so but that's what science is all about. Science is all about an evolving discovery of how things work, and when better data comes along or new ideas that work out that the old ideas were incorrect, and some newer data that shows that a different idea might be correct, then science should evolve and move along with that. The problem that we've got is that the politicians largely have been funding the climate scientists to produce the evidence that they need to support their policy. So instead of evidence-based policy, we've got policy-based evidence. And this isn't what we need. And there are discoveries that have been made in the last 20 years, for instance, which show that, it might be the case that not very much of the warming was actually down to carbon dioxide anyway, because what's been discovered now from 3 separate lines of evidence, which are the amount of light being reflected by the moon that comes from the Earth, and the evidence from satellites which are measuring the amount of radiation that's leaving the Earth at various different wavelengths, and also the evidence from all the weather satellites that have been monitoring the world's weather over the last 40 years, we can see that the cloud amount actually diminished quite markedly after 1995. And if there's less cloud, then there's a lot more of the sun's energy getting into the oceans.
So what you're saying is that there's no consensus really in the scientific community, and we've been sold a little bit of a pup. Howard, can I just come over? I know that you have a lot of researchers working with you on your Fairfield UK campaign in all different areas of the science. And I mean, what would you say with regards to what Roger just said there about there being a lack of consensus? Would that be something that you would agree with?
Totally, and thank you for inviting me on tonight.
You're welcome.
Well, Roger's talking so much sense, and as are the others. The important thing about this is that we're being sold emotion, not science. And that's the big thing that is really the problem. I mean, you know, I represent 37 million UK drivers in this country, and they're going to be the ones going to be asked to change massively because they've been told to drive electric vehicles by 2030 and diesel and petrol. And what a load of rubbish that is. In the last 10 years, for example, the road hauliers have actually halved their emissions by 50%, but that's not a headline on the BBC or Sky News. What we get is that we get the Greta Thunderpants and Richard Attenbollocks, you know, they come on and they tell us, you know, that what we should be being told. And it's absolutely wrong. I mean, we've just done a survey and we got 41,000 responses in 48 hours. And we said, are you getting accurate, reliable and objective information to prove the case for the government's 2050 net zero aspirations? That would definitely impact on your standard of living. It's slightly loaded, but I don't care. 74% said no. 74% said no. Simple as that.
They're not interested. People don't want to pay for it, do they? You know.
Well, that's the point. And 78% support your push for a referendum on the UK's.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah, and the point is, you know, this whole thing about diesel and petrol and electric vehicles. I mean, I'm frustrated as hell about the national grid. I'm working very hard with people like Craig McKinley MP and other ones, you know, Stevie Baker, John Redwood, and I produced this report which I don't know if you can see that. Can you? I've got it.
I literally don't take anything else to bed with me apart from that report.
Exactly. But the point is, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Bloggs and the white van man and the haulage industry and everything is being hit by this political ideal. There's no consultation. It wasn't in the Tory manifesto. None of it was mentioned. And guess what? We're paying for it now, and no one's reporting it, and that's why I'm really glad to see people like Mike Graham and people like GB News as well. They're the only ones talking in a balanced way and a fair and common sense way.
Well, that's true, and I was just going to go over to Mike actually and just say you have been a bit of a hero with this in terms of opening up the debate. I mean, have you experienced any resistance in terms of having people on your show that don't share the consensus views? Would that be? Happen or not?
I mean, you know,
or do you just tell them to piss off?
Well, I mean, I don't genuinely tell too many people to piss off. I usually use far stronger words. The problem is, right, I mean, we talk about scientific consensus now, as Roger was saying. You know, many centuries ago, you could have had consensus because a lot of people thought the Earth was flat. Didn't mean it were right. You know, just because they agree with each other doesn't mean that means true. Something now has happened. But yeah, I mean, I just ask questions. Like I say, today I had somebody on, I had Benny Kaiser on from Net Zero Watch, and I said to him, nobody's actually explained precisely what net zero actually is. Nobody knows what it is. If you ask Boris Johnson, he wouldn't know what it was. If you ask Rishi Sunak, what does it mean? How exactly will it benefit my world? How will my children benefit from net zero? Nobody can say, right? And so, yes, because I ask questions, because you're not supposed to ask questions anymore. I know we don't want to go to the COVID world, but, you know, they're suddenly now realising actually all of what we said for about a year and a half might be true. You've got sort of, you know, mainstream media figures now asking the same questions that I was asking literally over a year ago. So when I say, what is the point of recycling? Nobody can answer the question. I don't really want you to ask it. If I say, why, how can you tell me that an electric car is actually green? When it clearly isn't. It's got tyres, it has to be manufactured in a factory, it has to have young African boys digging around in a cobalt mine to actually
there's nothing green about
provide
that, is there?
the wherewithal to make a battery, which by the way is not biodegradable. How is any of that green? It's not.
But
It's not
Mike,
green.
Mike, I think the truth is changing because climate change policy is a sort of luxury of prosperity. And until now, it hasn't really hit people's pockets. And I think that as people's pockets are hit because of energy prices going up,
Absolutely.
we'll start to see people completely reevaluate. And in fact, we're already seeing this, really interesting. We're already starting to see this now with the EU. And the EU is saying that, well, perhaps gas could actually be described as a green fuel after all. But they're realizing they have to describe it as green because it's the only way they can actually, save themselves. So I think the high price of, fossil fuels sort of going through the roof and sort of bankrupting everybody is actually, could be, a real benefit because it will help people sort of see the reality of all of this.
And also what it does, sorry.
Go on, I was just going to say, to me, you see these companies like BP, which apparently, unbeknownst to anybody, is no longer stands for British Petroleum. It stands for Beyond Petroleum, apparently, whatever that means. They're now
What's
saying,
wrong with the word British?
Yeah.
Well, it's colonialist. You can't use it. It might be racist. Don't talk about
Right,
it. The point
okay.
is that, they reckon, apparently, right, that they're not going to make petroleum. It's like Marlboro saying, Philip Morris going, we're not going to make cigarettes anymore. And, that's horrible. And you're going, you're a cigarette company. What are you doing? What is wrong with you? Sell cigarettes to whoever wants to smoke them. Sell petrol. My daughter works in the Middle East, right? She spends a lot of time in Lebanon. You don't find anyone in Lebanon going, it's time we moved away from these fossil fuels. You know why? Because they're
really,
poor
really don't.
and they haven't got enough food and they sometimes don't have enough electricity and they need more power and they don't care how it comes.
No, Margie, what do you think that the implications are in terms of not having domestic energy security? I mean, it makes us very, very, very reliant, as you said before, on some pretty dodgy regimes. Having said that, though, we've been a pretty dodgy regime for the last 18 months, haven't we? So,
Yeah. I mean, look, the implications are huge. And if everyone remembers recently what happened with fertilizer, that's an example. Because you can't make fertilizer without certain key core ingredients. CO2 is one of them.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
That's right. And if you have a shortage of fertilizer, you end up with obviously a shortage of food. You end up with a shortage of many other products that rely on fertilizer in our energy sector. And of course, as we know historically, whenever you want political instability, the way to do it is labor shortages, which jack up prices, food shortages, which jack up prices, and energy crisis, which jacks up prices. And you have that
destroys morale.
Yeah, perfect storm. So there is this problem at the moment, and I worry with the spike in energy crisis, if you're going to implement these vaccine mandates and NHS staff, you end up with labour shortages that already exist in America. Those labour shortages are there for a combination of reasons, but one of them, in Tennessee, where I just came from, you can see it. Nobody wants to work in any of the restaurants. It's not just that Biden's stimulation package is providing money where you could be working for money. It's also that you've got these big restaurants at McDonald's and others. Actually, before I name the restaurants, let's just say in general terms, you've got these big restaurants saying vaccine mandates are going to come in.
Is that still a thing? Is that still happening?
Well, the problem is it's not in Tennessee.
To turn it over. Right,
It's not in Tennessee, but the problem is it's these corporates that are doing it. So you're going to end up like with the NHS here. You'll end up with labour shortages, which leads to a jack up in prices. And so that perfect storm, it's very worrying because you end up with a scenario where you can't make diesel because you need fertilizer. You can't grow food. It has an impact on agriculture. Meanwhile, we've got there's this jackdaw, right, off North Sea oil, natural gas field, huge. It's called jackdaw, and we can't seem to exploit it because there are regulatory concerns involved. And yet we're relying on energy that is unreliable because wind is unreliable.
It is unreliable.
You have to rely on the weather. Now, you can't have it both ways. If the weather is becoming increasingly unpredictable for whatever reason, you can't then say that the energy we're going to get from the weather is going to be reliable.
Yeah, Roger, is the weather becoming more unpredictable? Is that a load of crap as well?
Yeah, there are no trends. There are no trends in this that have been detected. Even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on extreme weather that was done a few years ago, they looked at all of this very carefully. they couldn't find any trends, any long-term trends in drought or in hurricanes or in any of these supposed, extreme scenarios.
Right. So the answer is that's more dodgy
more
data.
Intense. It's just a lot. Indeed. And but you get a lot of stories coming out from the media and a lot of the non-governmental organisations putting out grey literature which make these claims about extreme weather, which then get picked up by the media and regurgitated. But really, there is no strong evidence for, and certainly how you would pin that on the innocent little carbon dioxide molecule, goodness only knows, because the thing about carbon dioxide is the amount of warming that it's supposed to create by us adding more of it to the atmosphere. They used to say, it could be up to 6 or 7 centigrade. And then over the years, these numbers have calmed down and come down quite a lot. And now they're saying, well, it could be between 1.5 and 3.5 degrees, that a doubling of carbon dioxide.
So it just keep the goalposts keep shifting.
Really, when you disentangle this, when you look at the higher end of that, where they're saying, it'll be 3.5 degrees, that's because they're attributing every little scrap of warming to carbon dioxide, and they're saying nothing else has actually contributed to warming at all. Whereas that seems highly unlikely to me, there is no single control knob on the climate.
No, and we discussed that, didn't we?
Okay. Just quickly, one word is that we all know how modelling worked through the COVID phase, right? And to my knowledge and research, a lot of these climate predictions are based on modelling. And we've got to get away from this idea that computer modelling is going to successfully be able to not only predict the future, but define...
It predicts what they want to predict, doesn't it? Howard, you wanted to come in there. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to make support what Margid said earlier, that, when people realise that 6,000 products depend on oil in terms of the production, they buy them every day. That's not just medicines and all the plastics and all that sort of thing. That's going to hit home. It's not just the cost, etc., the impact on these people. And what is sad, and this is what really gets most of our supporters, and I get 2,000 emails a week, these people are saying, what does it mean to me? I'm not getting information. I don't understand what this is about. What is net zero, which is what Mike made the point is, what the hell? I think he's frozen, isn't he?
Maybe he's just having a really long gulp of that drink. Maybe he needs...
But the point is this: the media themselves are not. Actually, they are so biased, it's unbelievable. They're not presenting whatsoever the facts properly. I'm quite happy to have a good old debate with anyone on any show possible, but I've been cancelled by the BBC TV, and I think Sky News are the same. So they think I'm a climate change denier. I'm not a climate change denier. I'm a climate catastrophe denier. I'm a climate crisis denier, and that's what.
Also, can I just sorry, Lois? Can I just jump in? Can I just say this at this moment in time? I've been a journalist all my life. I've never been more ashamed of the media in this country, right? Majid's sitting here with us. Majid has no longer got a slot on LBC. I think that's a disgrace. I think that no matter what your opinion is, you should have the right to have it. And Howard has been the same. He's taken unbelievable flack for some of the beliefs that he's had. And they're not beliefs. They're just, he's just trying to do the best he can for ordinary working men and women who drive into London every day and find themselves paying 50 quid just before they can park the bleeding car. Majid, I hope, will pitch up somewhere. Who knows where? I can't say too much. But at the end of the day, opinion is what we do. Debate is what we do. It's not North Korea. Lawrence Borman knows about this as well because he was in the Brexit party. And people don't want you to say things. And I don't know when this country became like this, but I don't like it. And I'm really ashamed, as I say, of many of my colleagues. I don't count friends because, I'm not a very friendly person. I don't have very many friends. I don't need them. I do what I do. I don't care whether they want to give me, a knighthood. I couldn't care less. MBE, chuck it, shove it up your ass. I don't care. I talk for the ordinary people of this country. A guy rang me today to talk about Boris Johnson. He lost his 5-year-old son who was run over in an accident.
Tommy.
And he said to me, when we had the funeral, we couldn't have more than 5 people there. And
it's awful.
Is what we should be talking about. These are the people that matter. These are the people who are going to get shoved and pushed and told that they're going to have to get a heat pump They're going to have to give up their car. They're going to have to stop, having a fire. You know what? Screw you if you're the government telling me. Get out of my face and let the ordinary people do what they want to do.
Mike, that's what's happening here with the climate change, isn't it? He's being advised by a bunch of people dressed in lycra. And they're telling him what he should be doing. Yeah, and it's ridiculous.
I just want to go over to Lance now. So Lance has got a very unique perspective on it all. Obviously, being a former Brexit MEP, but also being the smoked salmon king. So I just want to say to you, Lance, what's all this got to do with the price of fish?
Yeah, well, you're right. So I've been in politics. I've been in politics, and I'm now in oily fish. And I can say, for one thing, they're very similar. Actually, it's a lot of parallels. But the thing that's
fish is cheaper, basically.
The thing that sort of brought this home to roost for me was back in October, because we know that in April domestic consumers are going to be hit when the price cap increases. But what I think a lot of people don't realise is that that protection that's given by the government is only given to domestic consumers, and because energy companies can't charge consumers more to meet the cost that they're facing on wholesale energy, what they do is they're screwing businesses to make up for the difference. And last October, so October just gone, we had to renew our electricity contract as a business. We're not a big business, we're a small business. Our biggest spend outside buying fish and paying for our staff is buying our electricity. Up until October this year, we were spending £200,000 a year on electricity. I was quoted an extra £150,000.
Wow.
And I thought that is just bonkers. £350,000 a year. It's just complete bonkers. So I spent a few weeks shopping around and going to some other electricity firms. And literally in the 2 weeks that I spent shopping around, the price went up to £400,000. And I ended up tying up a deal at 350, but I had to tie him for 3 years. The only way, of course, I can afford this is putting up my prices.
Yeah.
And this is what every small business is going to have to do. So all these consumers are going to face inflation.
Yeah.
They're all putting up their prices. So, as well as energy costs, we're seeing inflation coming all the way through. The government is stuck now. They're saying, well, maybe we'll knock the VAT off, or we won't charge for the climate sort of subsidies. That won't even make a tiny little dent in it. And I'll tell you what I think is the most frustrating thing for me is you hear, politicians talking all about, we have to protect our grandchildren. We've got to protect the planet and protect our grandchildren with all these sort of climate issues. We are getting into an absolute mountain of debt. That is where we need to protect our grandchildren. It's from this debt. It's not the climate. We can adapt to the climate as it happens, but you cannot adapt to that debt. It's got to be paid back. And politics.
No, it has to be paid back.
It's a mess.
Actually, Margid, you wanted to come in there.
I was trying to come in because what Lance is saying about price hikes, what I was referencing earlier, there's an additional point here is that when that happens, and of course it will happen, and he's just given a practical example of it with his salmon business, food prices go up. Now, small family businesses, medium-sized businesses, Lance has been in his family for over 100 years, I believe. Right?
116 years.
Yeah, and congratulations, that's fantastic. But the thing is that when this happens, a lot of businesses will go out of business because they can no longer afford. Now, again, back to my original point, who benefits from that? Big tech corporations. Because again, when they did this thing, again, based on their modeling through COVID lockdowns, Amazon's profit margins went up. Tesla, as we've mentioned already went up, and Deliveroo and all of these technological companies that are using apps and tech platforms. So once that small family business goes out, all we have left is buying food from the supermarkets if we can afford it. And of course, back to the lobbying point, if you end up with large corporations, many of them global, who are lobbying for this for technological reasons, who are already too close to government, well, one of the last things I said on air that seemed to upset a lot of people before my let's just put it this way, before my tenure there ended, was that the definition of fascism, if you look to what it is the merger of corporate power with government power. And so back to your original question, Suni Lois, about my concerns around the overarching state and authoritarianism, what happens to our civil liberties if all the small family businesses go out of business because they can no longer afford to survive, and the only thing left, a bit like in that film, Sylvester Stallone film, what was it called? Demolition Man, which is a popular adaptation of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which is a very serious book about this topic. You end up in a situation where only the chains, the international chains, survive. So we'd only be able to buy our salmon from, I don't know, Tesco or whatever, which is owned by Walmart, if memory serves me correctly, which is an American company, right? And you end up in a scenario where you've got government and corporate power merged, and the little man or woman, the little person and family is completely out of business, literally and figuratively. And that's not the kind of world I want to live in.
No, absolutely. Just big companies, and that's it. And Howard, but you know, what's going on, forcing everyone out of their petrol and diesel cars? I mean, surely that equals freedom. Electric cars, what can you do? 20 miles and then it goes off. You can't have the heating on. I mean, come on, it's not very sexy, is it? It's some guy picking you up and taking you out in a bloody electric car, honestly.
Lois, the worst thing about this is we're being told on one mode of transport. The Conservatives are supposed to be low tax and don't interfere in markets. They're interfering in markets in terms of saying you're not going to buy a diesel or petrol. If we don't actually get that, because it's not in legislation yet, the 2030 ban, if we don't get that...
We need to stop that.
Well, if we don't get it changed within the next year, the whole production line of everything in this country, they cannot go back to making diesel or petrol. And that's...
Right, well, Howard, you and I need to work together and make sure that doesn't happen.
And the simple thing is that we should let clean fuel technology evolve by itself. It does not need to be told you've got to drive one modal form of transport. Electric vehicles are great. They're great if you want to do a quick 50 miles to 100 miles around locally and just pop here to this. Great then. And get ready for this though. What's going to happen to the 35 billion of fuel duty and VAT?
Yeah, well, that's all going to go, isn't it?
And that's going to go.
But the other thing, Howard, is that, and you know this better than anyone, the manufacturers are complicit in this. And I don't know why they are. You know, Jaguar Land Rover have said they're going to stop making diesel and petrol cars. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, that's the last car I buy from you. Same with Volvo. Volvo said we're not going to make anything but electric cars for the rest of time in a few years. So, you know, it's almost like we're being pushed into this position of not having a a You know, I rather like driving around.
Well, this is what Margin said that just now, this corporation thing. Why you just mentioned those big corporations. Now, what's going to happen is you could buy diesel or petrol from China and ship it in. Is that happening? Yeah. Who's going to run a garage and selling diesel petrol? You know, they're going to be dying of death. The whole thing is being interfered with. And I've got a lot of backbench MPs supporting this. You know, people like Sir John Redwood, Steve Baker, Graham Stringer from the Labour. These guys, you know, are totally and utterly behind it. They wrote some lovely quotes in this report, which I'm happy to send to you guys. And they're saying the simple thing is we need to consult the people that matter. In my case, it's drivers. There's 37 million of them. They weren't spoken to.
Nothing more horrific than having an electric car. I really can't. Sorry, Roger, you were just saying.
They want everybody to have electric cars because they want their batteries connected to the grid so that's their emergency power supply when the wind drops. That's what it's really about. And that's why they want everybody to have these smart meters.
Yeah.
When
electricity, you know, quadruples in price, as we've seen it doing, and Majid sort of mentioned this as well, you know, if you're trying to, you know, charge your car and it's gone from costing, you know, 25 quid to 100 quid, you might start thinking again. It might not be, they've got control. They can put it up like that, right? It's not based on markets. It's not, at least the one thing about petroleum is at least it's actually traded on a market. You might not like the way the market works, but at least it's a market. You know, Saudi oil is traded
on a giant iPad.
A barrel. With electricity, they can just go, we're putting it up, stuff you, this is what you're going to pay.
Yeah, no.
And the irony of this is today at 12 o'clock, the national grid was running on only 16% renewables. The rest were the usual suspects.
Yeah. No, totally.
I think I may have put the camera
when the wind drops.
I've got a statistic that Mike's going to love. You're probably not aware of this, Mike.
Come on, Lance.
Did you know that 8% of the entire carbon dioxide produced by the world is made from the manufacture of concrete?
Yeah.
Well, listen, you know, not just the manufacturing, but presumably the growth of it as well. What I can tell you is that my sister and my daughter bought me some stock in a concrete company in America. And guess what it's doing? It's going like that.
Growing.
I love that.
Brilliant. Okay, guys, you've been fantastic. I just want to have a quick one-word answer or a couple of word answer from each of you about Boris Johnson and what we think about what's going on today. Is he going to survive? Yes or no, Margid?
Well, listen, I'd say just one thing I'll say is be very, very careful what we wish for, because if anyone...
Yeah, better the devil you know.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay, Mike?
I'll give you 2 words. Bye-bye.
Roger, what do you think? Boris, is he going to go? What's happening? What do you think? Yes or no?
Yeah, the green wellies have done for him.
Was that me? The sound went there.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, just saying yes or no. Boris, what do you think?
I think he's going to hang on for a little bit, but I think people will wait and see what happens in the May elections.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I think I agree with you. And Howard?
Well, Roger Gale and people like Douglas Ross have come out and said, please resign. There's some serious backbench MPs saying go. I think he'll survive for a period of time, but I don't think he'll be the next Prime Minister in the next election.
Oh, okay. All right then. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, so basically I can't say how grateful I am to you for today. And with that, we've run out of time. I'm so pleased and chuffed that tonight we've properly opened the debate on climate issues and net zero, because where there is no freedom of speech, there is no freedom. I'd like to say a big thank you to all my guests, including Mike Graham, Lance Foreman, Roger Tattersall, Margid Nawaz and Howard Cox. And I'd just like to remind everyone that if you go onto the, CAR26.org, you can sign our petition for a referendum. You can buy a wonderful little CO2 because we need more CO2. And actually you can join up and become a CAR26.org member. Have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you to my guests. You've been brave and brilliant. And it's great being the only girl with all these guys. My absolute happy place. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.